Yeah, I remember saying to who was in charge, Todd Greenberg, and I was even back in David Gallup's time, even back before that, David Smith's time. I'd say, why would I keep telling the Penrith board to keep spending all this money on development if other clubs can just come in and grab them at 19, 20 years of age and take them away, and we can't defend ourselves against that, and that there is no compensation to Penrith. Then they have this ridiculous thing that came in, which was the getting rid of the national youth competition, all right, and installing this thing, what they call development contracts, which is an absolute farce and does not help the game in any way, shape or form. All right, I could talk for hours about this.
Well, I know you can.
I could talk for hours about this subject. And I said, why under this system would we allow Panthers to keep spending the amount of money on the development that they're doing, trying to build their club for themselves? And I think at one stage we got to a top 30 where 24 or 25 of the top 30 debuted with the club. That's how extensive the development was. And he said, we would hope Penrith will keep doing that anyway. I said, why would they? And he said, the game has to pay for it. I said, so what are you saying? He said, well, the game should pay Penrith Academy to keep going. I said, how much? And I said, what, $2 million a year, $3 million a year for the Panthers Academy to produce talent for all other teams? Is that what you're saying? And that was a discussion they were having at the time. Never did I ever think they were ever going to do that. Never did I ever think they'd get to the point where they'd actually turn around and do that. And they didn't. But what's the incentive? And you get a team like the Roosters. Now, the Roosters are a development club too, but they've got to go out and buy their elite junior talent, right? Because they've got no junior league. They have an association with the Central Coast, but they get a lot of kids from New Zealand, a lot of kids from Queensland, a lot of kids from New South Wales country. That's the journey we're on with the Bulldogs. It's the same as that. We don't have big junior leagues. Every club should be doing something. Some don't do much at all.
But development doesn't mean you pull someone from the under sixes, does it? Like you can develop from junior reps. So I'm not interrupting, but you made the point there where 24 of the 30 were at Penrith, for instance, and were local. Should that not be the aim of every club?
They weren't all locals. They're what we call developed talent.
Yeah. But should the game not make it a priority that every club has that?
I think local junior league boundaries are historical. I don't think they should have any bearing at all.
But should the game not incentivise every club to develop a top 30 that has 20 players that you have developed in it?
Yeah.
Because that provides greater resources to the game.
Yeah, but these development contracts that they come up with this model that you could have a top 30 and then you just buy your best six. You just pick your best six and you pay them a ridiculous amount of money. It used to be $60,000, now it's $80,000 to pay a kid who should be earning 10 and still doing a trade and still going to school or doing what he's doing. And I said that model just doesn't fit. Those kids that you're now paying $60,000 and $80,000 to used to be on $5,000 and $10,000 contracts, learning their trade and coming through the system. And their response was, we've got to stop paying for development. We've got to stop paying so much money for all these kids. Just pick the blue chippers. And I said, who are the blue chippers? He said, the ones that are definitely going to play first grade. I said, they're not all Greg Inglis, mate.
No, that's not the... Yeah.
I pointed out to the training fields. I said, there's 150 kids out there. You tell me which one's the blue chipper, because I don't know which one it is. 99% of us are average. 99% of us who played first grade are average. It's just how long you persevere and how well you can get through and survive. It's as simple as that. The top 5% are so elite. I should say 95, not 99%. But the top 5% are so elite, all right? The rest of us are all surviving. We're all just trying to stay in the game for as long as we can and train hard and be a part of our dream and play first grade and play first grade football. And there may be some that come through at 16, 17 years of age. You'll get a Darren Lockyer or a Brad Fittler. They're obvious. Anyone can find them, right? People saying you found Brad Fittler, well, it's like saying I discovered the Blue Mountains. Someone would have stumbled upon it eventually, right? So, but it's the others that are just come through and they go through a process, and some debut at 18 and some debut at 26 and everything in between, and all the trials and tribulations they're going to go through in their life, and the education, the welfare, the training, the setbacks, the injuries, the treatments, and everything that you do, trying to cobble together a team under a salary cap system that's drives me mad. And a development system now that's just wrong for the game. It is wrong for the game. And what they thought they were doing was spreading the talent out by saying, well, you can keep your six best. Well, I want to know how you know who your six best are.
Yeah.
And I want to know how many of those have actually gone on to be.
Shouldn't the system be, where you talked about, look at the training fields, there's 150 kids out there. Shouldn't the system be not to pick the six best? Shouldn't it be to cast the net and grab them all?
All of them. Absolutely.
The game survives on that, doesn't it?
They call it, what was the term they use? Warehousing. So they're trying to get rid of warehousing, that you'd have too many players in your club, but you can't warehouse. If you've got a player there that should be playing NRL and he's not playing NRL, then the manager and the player is knocking on your door saying, I need to go and play somewhere else, and you let them go. If they can get an NRL job somewhere else, you let them go. You're not warehousing. But there's not enough reward for the money that the development clubs spend on development.
What's it cost to develop a player?
Oh, that's a great question.
Well, that was one of my other questions.
It's not the cost of developing. I used to call it a pyramid. And I used to draw pyramids. And I'd say, how many players have I got to start with, right, at the base to actually isolate and get one NRL player, a Bryce Cartwright or a Regan Campbell-Gillard, or whatever. How many did I start with to get that player? I remember at a time I went up to see the Broncos because Broncos had all Queensland to themselves and they were investing heavily in game development and junior development, but they had a lot of kids on scholarship, a lot of kids on contract. And I said to them, what do you see as a successful development? They said, a bloke who comes through the system and plays 40 NRL games. I went, wow, that's a high mark, to come through the system and play 40 first grade games to say it's a successful development. Well, that's what we see as a success. I said, well, so how many kids would do that? 2 out of every 10. I said, wow, 2 out of every 10 are going to play, in your system, are going to play 40 first grade games. I found that incredible. And then he said, oh, no, but we started with 100 to get to that 10 and we started with 1,000 to get to that 100, right? It was just numbers and eventually they come through, and because they had a market and a monopoly on the market and they were able to, around that time in Queensland, they were the only show in town. They had a huge advantage over everybody else, so.
What happens to the kids they let go?
Well, some just shuffle off to other teams. They play Queensland Cup. I don't know.
But how many of them could you? Could have.
Yeah, well, it's, yeah.
Anyway, so this is Gus's thing, and this is something I've been thinking about bringing up. So this has not been set up because I see players. There's a lot of players moving around the joint, and
the unrestricted movement of players between NRL clubs is a problem. I've said that for ages because that gives all power to the player and the player manager in negotiations, and there are some that use that. And because of the lack of talent in the competition or the lack of numbers of talent in certainly key positions like your front rowers and your halves and those sorts of things, it gives them massive bargaining power, which supply and demand.
Yeah,
a lot of demand for a short supply. It's going to drive prices through the roof. Once those prices are established, other players take their mark off those prices. All right, it's an inflationary effect on the game, a massive inflationary effect on the game.
So Lachlan Elias, and he's just an example. He's going to sign $1 million contract with the club, isn't he? He's a halfback.
No. Lachlan Elias is not. He's not commanding.
But what the supply and demand thing? Like how many clubs are going to want a halfback that's played 40 NRL games?
Yeah, I'd imagine there'll be a few. Yeah, but he's not.
But he's going to get a lot. He's going to get big money.
He's not in the $1 million status. Well, people will speculate. Yeah. People will speculate. Like we got some young halfbacks in the system at the Bulldogs that we're trying to tie up longer term, in the hope and the belief that they can develop into NRL players. But they'll be 24 and 25 before we really know the answer as to how long they're going to be in the game. They show great potential at the moment, and we're going to persevere with it, and that's what we're going to do. That's, you don't often get lucky to get a Cleary and a Luai suddenly come through your system at the same time. But if you're doing the right thing with your recruitment and your development and all that, these sort of young players emerge. And there are some players that are exposed way too early. There are kids that have got too much money too early, exposed to first grade too early and given up on too early. And we've talked about this repeatedly, certain positions take longer. To develop the player.
Which is kind of why I've thought about this. So
you'll spend a lot of money on a player and he never really gets to the mark. He never gets to where you are.
But if he's a locally developed player and you get relief in the salary cap, you'd be inclined to try and stick with him. Yeah. So what?
But it comes down to salary caps and drafts and how our country's not set up for it. It come up to the getting rid of the NYC competition, the national youth competition. Sides, clubs that weren't compelled to have development pathways of their own or spend a minimal amount that became recruitment clubs rather than development clubs. All of this should have been handled by the NRL a long, long time ago.
So
and long before the current commission's time. You can't blame the commission for it. But we haven't done much to correct it either, and I don't think we've done much to understand it. I think the people in clubs that are responsible for all this, the recruitment, the development, the dealing with player managers, the dealing with parents, understanding junior leagues, understanding the backgrounds that these kids come from, understanding education and welfare, they're rarely the ones that are brought to the table to discuss what development contracts and salary capping and roster management should be like. I think the clubs should be given an amount of money and let them spend it at their own way. What the RLPA and the league has done is they've dictated what they should earn and how they should earn it. And that's put a lot of pressure on clubs and it's put pressure on development. It's not helping player development.
No. So just to conclude this, and this might be too simplistic, and if it is, tell me, but if I said to you, under the new salary cap, you get a 25% discount on the salary of a developed player, would that change the landscape dramatically?
Well, I think it should go down to years spent and games played with your club. With years spent and games played, the size of the discount.
Okay.
But there should be dispensation at the lower level so that you're not losing kids that you contract and develop through your Pathways program. That you're not losing them before they become. And what will happen is you might have your NRL side, sort of half established, and then you go out and buy a player that's going to help you win games now because that's what the fans want, that's what the sponsors want, that's what the media expects. Otherwise, your head coach is going to lose his job and the board's going to lose their job. So everyone buys to win in the current. And all of a sudden, you get a couple of really good young players come along, and everyone else sees it, and they're able to come in and offer them $300,000 and $400,000 as teenagers when you can't. You haven't got the money for that. So now what do? I've got to tip some older blokes out at the top, which everyone screams about, to bring these kids in who aren't ready and overpay them just to keep them in the competition. Right? That's the part that I don't like. That's the difficult part of development. So when you're looking at your roster and what you manage, me bringing in high-priced top players that might make everyone feel better today, right, could come back to bite us in 2 years' time when this 18-year-old kid is now 20 and everyone's seen that he's got NRL potential and someone from down the road just comes in and offer him $300,000 or $400,000 and I'm trying to keep him for a development contract or a New South Wales Cup contract, which is where his development really is at the moment. So what do? We throw too much money at him. So what's he do? He doesn't stop doing his trade. He stops doing his education because he's going to be a full-time footballer. They get in the system too early. There's a whole discussion around this that's never really been had.
It's fascinating.
And all the development is done by the clubs. The league have got there's no one at the league with any real understanding of this. New South Wales Rugby League just runs competitions. They just run competitions, and the NRL run the NRL competition. All right?